Jessica and I live a comfortable life. More than comfortable, really. We're not swimming in wealth, but let's just say we've never had to worry about how to pay the bills or skip out on the occasional splurge. I've worked hard to provide for us, and I've always enjoyed spoiling her. When we celebrated our 5th wedding anniversary 2 years ago, I bought her a car. Not just any car. One she had been dreaming about for months. Her eyes lit up like the 4th of July when I handed her the keys, and I remember thinking, this is what happiness looks like. Jessica had a way of making you feel like the effort was worth it. She wasn't just beautiful. She had this vibrant energy about her, a confidence that could turn heads in any room. But she also had, how should I put this, a knack for knowing what she wanted and expecting to get it. Fast forward to this year, her birthday was coming up, and she had been dropping hints for weeks, no months, about the newest iPhone. Every ad on TV, every billboard we passed, every tech review on her YouTube feed was about this phone. She'd casually mention how much easier it would make her life, how her old one was basically a dinosaur, and how everyone else she knew was upgrading. I knew what she was doing, and to be fair, it wasn't unreasonable for her to want a new phone. I mean, we weren't strapped for cash, but this year had been rough on us financially. A couple of unexpected expenses had come up, some medical bills, a repair job on the house, and a business deal that didn't pan out the way I'd hoped. Nothing catastrophic, but enough that I was trying to be cautious about unnecessary spending. So, when she finally came out and said it, I want the new iPhone for my birthday, I hesitated. I explained everything, laid it out as logically and gently as I could. I promised her that next year, when things had stabilized, I'd get her the phone. I even suggested a smaller gift in the meantime, something thoughtful that wouldn't strain our finances. But Jessica wasn't having it. Her reaction caught me off guard. At first, it was just a furrowed brow, a disappointed sigh. Then came the questions. Why can't you prioritize me? She asked. You always find money for other things. But when it's something I really want, suddenly we're broke? I tried to reason with her, to explain that this wasn't about prioritizing, it was about being responsible. But the more I talked, the more upset she got. By the end of the conversation, she wasn't just disappointed. She was livid. You don't care about me, she said, her voice trembling with anger. Support the channel by subscribing. It really makes a difference. You'd rather save a few bucks than make me happy on my birthday. It escalated from there. Words were exchanged that we both probably regret. I remember sitting on the couch afterward, staring at the blank TV screen, wondering how something so small had turned into such a massive argument. The next morning, I woke up to find her packing a bag. I need some space, she said, her tone clipped and final. Before I could even think of what to say, she was out the door. For the next 2 days, the house felt emptier than it ever had. Jessica didn't call, didn't text. I sat there replaying the fight in my head, wondering if I'd made a mistake. Had I underestimated how much this meant to her? Or was this just who she was? Little did I know, those 2 days of silence were only the beginning. The house was unbearably quiet in those 2 days after Jessica left. It wasn't just the act itself that was shocking. It was the passion, the intensity. She was laughing, smiling, her movements deliberate and confident. The video wasn't silent. I could hear her voice, her laughter, the way she teased and encouraged them. It was as if she was performing, putting on a show. There was no hesitation, no shame, only a bold, brazen confidence that made my chest tighten. At the end of the video, the camera lingered on her face as she leaned into the lens and smiled. Her lips curled into a smirk as she whispered, I'm earning my new iPhone. Before the screen went black, I froze, my phone trembling in my hands. The air felt sucked out of the room, replaced by a crushing weight on my chest. My first reaction wasn't anger, it was disbelief. How could this be the same woman I married, the woman I loved and built a life with? But disbelief quickly gave way to something darker. A wave of nausea rolled through me, followed by a sharp, searing pain in my chest. It wasn't just that she had been unfaithful, it was how calculated it was. She had filmed this, edited it, and sent it to me with a message that cut deeper than any argument we'd ever had. My mind spiraled into 1,000 questions. When had she planned this? Who were these men? How could she do something so deliberate, so cruel? The betrayal wasn't just in the act. It was in the way she flaunted it, as if to say, "This is what I think of your promises. This is what you mean to me." I wanted to smash the phone, to erase the video and everything it represented. But instead, I just sat there, staring at the screen, unable to move. My hands felt cold, my heart pounding in my ears. Tears burned in my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Anger bubbled beneath the surface, but it was tempered by a deep, gut-wrenching sadness. This wasn't just a betrayal of our marriage. It was a complete shattering of the trust and love I thought we had. For hours, I sat there, the weight of the video pressing down on me. The image of her smile, that smug, defiant smirk, was burned into my mind. And as much as I wanted to hate her, I couldn't stop the ache in my chest. This was the woman I had vowed to love and cherish, for better or worse. But now all I could see was a stranger. The night stretched on, and I found myself staring into the dark, wondering what I had done to deserve this. The day after I received that video, I didn't sleep. How could I? The images, the laughter, the betrayal. It all replayed in my mind on an endless loop. I couldn't escape it, even when I closed my eyes. By the time morning came, my exhaustion was replaced by a cold, resolute anger. Something inside me had snapped, and there was no going back. I spent that morning going through the house, gathering everything of hers into boxes. Clothes, makeup, shoes, jewelry. It all went into neat piles. The car keys I had gifted her 2 years ago were placed on top of a box in the hallway. I couldn't even look at the key fob without feeling a wave of bitterness. That car had been a symbol of my love, my pride in her, and now it was nothing more than a cruel reminder of her betrayal. While packing her things, I called my lawyer. I wasn't going to let this slide, and I wasn't going to be caught off guard if she tried to twist the story. I explained everything, the argument, her leaving, the video. My lawyer's voice was calm, professional, but I could sense the tension behind her words. "Do you have the video saved?" she asked. I hesitated. "Yes," I said finally, hating myself for admitting it. "Good," she replied. "You'll need it. This isn't just grounds for divorce. This is actionable evidence if you want to pursue division of assets." That word, assets, reminded me of how much we had built together. The house, the car, the savings. It wasn't just about money. It was about the years I had spent trusting her, providing for her, building a life I thought we both cherished. Now it felt like she had torn it all down in one night. 2 days later, she came back. I was in the living room when I heard the door open. For a split second, my heart raced, as if some part of me had been waiting for her to return. But when I saw her walk in, my heart sank. She looked radiant, as if she had just come back from a day of shopping with friends. Her hair was freshly styled, her makeup flawless. In her hand, she held a sleek white box, the unmistakable packaging of the new iPhone. She was smiling as though nothing had happened, as though the last few days had been nothing more than a bad dream. "Hey," she said casually, setting the box on the counter. "I'm home." I stared at her, my mind reeling. She didn't even flinch, didn't offer so much as an apology. She acted as if she hadn't sent me that video, as if she hadn't destroyed everything we had built. "Jessica?" I said, my voice low and steady, though I could feel the anger boiling just beneath the surface. "What are you doing here?" She frowned, clearly taken aback by my tone. "What do you mean? I live here." "Not anymore," I said, standing up and gesturing toward the hallway. "Your things are packed. They're by the door. You can take them and leave." Her face fell, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of panic in her eyes. "What are you talking about?" she asked, her voice trembling. "This is my home too." "Not after what you did," I snapped. "Not after that video. You think you can just walk back in here like nothing happened?" She opened her mouth to argue, but I cut her off. "I've filed for divorce," I said coldly, "and I've already spoken to a lawyer." I'm going to court to make sure you don't get a dime of what we've built together." Her expression changed instantly. The confident, carefree Jessica was gone, replaced by someone desperate, pleading. "Wait," she said, stepping closer. "Please let me explain. It's not what you think." I laughed bitterly. "Not what I think. You filmed yourself with 3 other men and sent it to me. What part of that am I misunderstanding?" Tears welled up in her eyes, and she reached for my hand, but I pulled away. They forced me," she stammered. "I didn't want to do it, but they made me. I was scared." Her words hung in the air, but they felt hollow, rehearsed. There was no fear in the video, no hesitation. She had smiled, laughed, even leaned into the camera to deliver that cruel line. "Do you think I'm stupid?" I asked, my voice trembling with fury. "You expect me to believe that after watching the way you acted in that video?" She started to sob, falling to her knees. "I made a mistake," she cried. "I didn't mean to hurt you. Please, we can work through this. Don't throw everything away." I stepped back, shaking my head. "You threw it away, Jessica. The moment you hit send on that video, you made your choice." Her pleas grew louder, more frantic, but I had already made up my mind. I pointed to the door, my voice cold and unyielding. "Take your things and leave. I don't want to see you here again." As she gathered her belongings, she kept begging, apologizing, swearing she would change. But I didn't waver. I stood by the window, watching as she loaded her things into the car. When she finally drove away, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Relief, anger, sadness. But above all, I felt a sense of resolve. I had done the right thing, no matter how much it hurt. Now, it was time to rebuild. Not just my life, but my sense of trust, my dignity. And with the court date looming, I knew this was far from over. The day of the court hearing was one I'll never forget. Walking into that courtroom, I felt a strange combination of determination and trepidation. I wasn't there for revenge. Not exactly. What I wanted was justice, a fair division of the life Jessica and I had built together. After all, I had worked tirelessly to provide for us, and the idea of losing half of everything to someone who had betrayed me so deeply was unbearable. Jessica showed up wearing a modest dress, her makeup understated, her demeanor quiet. It was a far cry from the confident, defiant woman I had seen in that video. She avoided my gaze, her eyes fixed on the floor as we waited for the proceedings to begin. When the judge entered, the room fell silent, the weight of the moment pressing down on everyone present. My lawyer, a seasoned professional with a reputation for being both sharp and unrelenting, laid out the case with precision. The video, as painful as it was to revisit, became the cornerstone of our argument. "Your Honor," my lawyer began, her voice calm but firm, "this is not simply a case of marital discord. It's a case of gross misconduct and intentional harm. My client has evidence that Mrs. Jessica's last name acted with complete disregard for their marriage vows, and it is our contention that Mr. My last name should be granted the majority of their shared assets as a result." The video was submitted as evidence, and though it wasn't played in full for the court, even the mention of it was enough to send whispers rippling through the room. Jessica's lawyer tried to argue that the video was irrelevant, that it was a moment of poor judgment and didn't reflect her contributions to the marriage. But when Jessica took the stand, it was clear her story wasn't holding up. She tried to paint a picture of herself as a victim, claiming she had been coerced, pressured into actions she didn't truly consent to. But under cross-examination, her story unraveled. My lawyer asked pointed questions, drawing attention to the details of the video, the laughter, the confidence, the deliberate nature of her actions. Jessica began to falter. Her voice wavered. Her answers became inconsistent. At one point, she broke down in tears, claiming she was not in her right mind and begging for leniency. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s, listened carefully to both sides before delivering her verdict. When she finally spoke, her words were measured but resolute. "This court recognizes the profound betrayal and emotional harm suffered by Mr. My last name due to the actions of his spouse. It is the decision of this court that the marital assets, including the property and the vehicle in question, be awarded to Mr. My last name. Mrs. Jessica's last name will not be entitled to further financial support. Hearing those words, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. It wasn't about punishing Jessica. It was about reclaiming my dignity, my life. When we left the courtroom, Jessica tried to approach me. Her eyes were red from crying, her voice hoarse. "Please," she whispered, "can we just talk? I made a mistake, but I still love you." I looked at her, the woman I had once adored, and all I could feel was a hollow ache. "Jessica," I said quietly, "we're done. You need to move on." "So do I," she sobbed, but I walked away. Back at the house, the silence that had once been suffocating now felt like peace. Jessica's things were gone, the space was mine again, and for the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe. But Jessica's life didn't unfold so easily. With the court ruling stripping her of her share of the assets and the car, she was left with very little. Her credit cards were maxed out, and her savings were practically non-existent. She couldn't afford rent, and with no close friends willing to take her in, she ended up sleeping in her car. Her parents, who lived overseas, weren't in a position to help her immediately. She spent 2 months living this way, rotating between public parking lots and shelters, trying to scrape together enough money for a plane ticket home. I heard about her struggles through mutual acquaintances. At first, I felt a pang of guilt. No matter what she had done, it was hard to imagine someone I had loved falling so far. But then I reminded myself that she had made choices, deliberate and hurtful choices, that had led her here. Eventually, she managed to gather enough money to fly to her parents. I thought that would be the end of it, that she would start fresh somewhere far away. But the news I heard next left me stunned. Her parents, staunchly traditional and deeply disappointed by her actions, didn't welcome her back with open arms. Instead, they scolded her, shamed her for what she had done. Her father, who had never liked me much, reportedly told her, "You had a good man, and you destroyed it for what? A phone? Shame on you." Her mother, who had once adored me, refused to let her stay in their home for long. "We raised you better than this," she said. Jessica's friends, the ones who had been so supportive during our marriage, were nowhere to be found. Most of them sided with me, shocked and disgusted by her behavior. She was left isolated, her once vibrant social life reduced to nothing. Hearing about her downfall, I didn't feel triumph or joy, only a somber sense of finality. Jessica had destroyed everything, not just between us, but in her own life. And while I had found a way to move forward, she was left to pick up the pieces. Looking back, I realized that sometimes justice doesn't come in the form of revenge. It comes from the natural consequences of someone's actions. And in Jessica's case, those consequences were devastating. After Jessica returned to her parents' home, things only grew worse for her. She had hoped that the stability of being with family would help her rebuild, but the reality was far different. Her father was a stern man, deeply traditional and prideful. When he looked at her now, it wasn't with the protective love of a father. It was with shame and disappointment. "I warned you," he told her on her first night back. "I told you not to waste your life with foolishness. And now look where you are." Her mother was no kinder. Though she didn't yell or criticize as openly, her cold indifference stung even more. Jessica spent her days in the guest room, if you could even call it that. It was more like storage space, cluttered with boxes and forgotten furniture. They hadn't even bothered to clear it out for her. Her parents made it clear she wasn't welcome to stay for long. "You're an adult," her mother said one evening over dinner, barely looking at Jessica. "You need to figure out your own way. We can't keep cleaning up your messes." Jessica tried to reach out to her friends, but the responses were lukewarm at best. People who had once laughed with her, gone on trips with her, were now distant, offering little more than half-hearted sympathy. "I'm so busy these days," one of her closest friends said during a brief phone call. "Maybe we can catch up next month?" Others didn't even bother responding. The job market was no kinder. With no savings, no car, and a tarnished reputation, Jessica struggled to find work. She tried applying to retail stores, but her lack of recent experience worked against her. One interviewer even recognized her from the social media fallout after our divorce. Yes, the video had leaked, though I had no part in spreading it. "You're that Jessica, aren't you?" the manager asked, raising an eyebrow as he handed her back her resume. "Sorry, we're not hiring right now." She left the interview humiliated, the weight of her choices pressing down on her. Then came the worst blow of all. Her health began to deteriorate. The stress, the poor living conditions, the constant anxiety, all of it took a toll. She started losing weight. Her hair became brittle, and she developed insomnia that left her exhausted but unable to sleep. Her parents began dropping hints that it was time for her to move out, though they knew she had nowhere to go. The tension in the house was unbearable. Every meal was eaten in silence, every interaction strained. "You're not the daughter we raised," her father said one night during yet another argument. "You're a disgrace to this family." That was the last straw. Jessica packed her bags and left the house with no real plan, no destination in mind. For the next few months, she couch-surfed, staying with distant relatives and acquaintances who reluctantly offered her a place to stay. But those arrangements never lasted long. People grew tired of her presence, of her constant need for help. One night, she found herself sitting alone in a rundown motel room, staring at the cracked walls and flickering fluorescent light. She had just enough money left for one more night. After that, she would be out on the street again. In her desperation, she picked up her phone, the same iPhone that had cost her everything, and scrolled through her contacts. She hesitated before calling me. The phone rang, and I saw her name flash on the screen. For a moment, I considered ignoring it, but curiosity got the better of me. "What do you want, Jessica?" I asked, my voice cold. There was a long pause before she spoke. I need help," she said, her voice trembling. "Please, I don't have anyone else to turn to." I took a deep breath, steadying myself. The sound of her voice stirred something in me. Not love, not pity, but a deep, almost primal sense of closure. "Jessica," I said evenly, "the help you need isn't something I can give you. You burned every bridge we had. You made your choices. Now you have to live with them." She started to cry, but I hung up before she could say anything else. I later heard that she had moved to a shelter for women in a nearby city. She spent her days doing odd jobs, barely scraping by. Her once vibrant social media accounts were silent, her glamorous photos replaced by nothing but a blank profile picture. Even her parents cut off contact entirely, refusing to answer her calls. "She made her bed," her father reportedly said to a family friend. "Now she can lie in it." Jessica's fall from grace was complete. She had lost her husband, her home, her friends, her family, everything she had once taken for granted. As for me, I moved on, slowly but surely. The pain of her betrayal never fully disappeared, but it dulled with time. I sold the house, started traveling more, and eventually met someone who reminded me of what love could be. Kind, genuine, and unselfish. Jessica, as far as I know, is still trying to pick up the pieces of her life. But some mistakes leave scars too deep to heal, and some bridges, once burned, can never be rebuilt. Support the channel by subscribing. It really makes a difference.